The night sky over southern Belarus erupted into twin fireballs, and Russian pilots realized too late that their certainty of safety had been a fatal illusion. At 12:28 a.m. on November 3rd, 2025, two IL-78M90A aerial refueling tankers, the backbone of Russia's long-range strike power, were ripped apart in mid-air. From the ground, the explosions looked like suns blooming in the darkness. From the cockpits of their escorting fighters, it looked like the sudden erasure of Russia's ability to reach deep into Ukraine. For a few stunned seconds, the sky was silent except for the falling debris. But this destruction wasn't random. It was the final consequence of a chain of decisions Russia began only hours earlier. To understand how Moscow turned its own victory into a death sentence, we need to rewind. The operation began with routine confidence. At 10:47 p.m. on November 2nd, from the Machulishki airbase in Belarus, two of Russia's remaining fully operational IL-78M90A tankers lifted into the night sky. Each was a $150 million flying gas station, carrying up to 238,000 pounds of TS-1 jet fuel. Escorting them were four Tu-22 M3 backfire bombers, another $400 million of strategic strike power. This wasn't just a flight, it was meant as a demonstration of overwhelming force. At 11:20 p.m., the bombers delivered their payload. 16 K-32 cruise missiles dropped and streaked towards Chernihiv at Mach 4. The impact was devastating. 3 HIMARS warehouses vanished in secondary explosions. 2 American-made ANTPQ-53 counter-battery radars were silenced. In less than 5 minutes, Ukraine had taken $1.8 billion in losses. With the strike complete, the bombers began turning back toward Russian airspace. But their mission depended on making it home. The Tu-22S were fuel-hungry, and the two IL-78S moved into position over southern Belarus, confident they were protected by friendly air defenses. That assumption became their second fatal miscalculation. The damage report reached President Zelensky's desk in Kyiv. After a brief silence, his order was simple. Operation Hoda Sniper 2.0 is authorized. Give tactical command full discretion on timing. The message cascaded down to an underground bunker in Chernihiv, where a Ukrainian general lifted his eyes from the screen. He had been waiting for this signal since the evening of November 1st. For 2 days, his assets had been completely still. 6 Leica 100 high-altitude reconnaissance drones, silent sentinels hovering 16,000 feet above the Earth, had been watching. At 12:12 a.m., they saw it. The Russian formation descending to 15,000 feet for refueling. Through the thermal lens of a Leica, a glowing hotpoint appeared on the lead IL-78's left wing. The refueling probe warming to tilde 410 degree F. That was the trigger. In the frozen stillness of the Nyarovlia forest, 8 Bayraktar TB2 drones came alive. On the radar screens of the S-400 battery at Baranovichi, 4 high-priority targets suddenly appeared, screaming toward what it believed was sovereign airspace. The system followed protocol and made what seemed a logical decision: eliminate them immediately. 28 seconds later, the sky tore open. 2448 N6 DM interceptors launched in ripple-fire fashion, each missile worth more than the entire Ukrainian decoy squadron. One by one, the hollow decoys were vaporized. The price of this deception was $40,000. The cost to Russia was $56 million, and more importantly, an emptied S-400 battery. The Ukrainian planners had counted on this. The local Pantsir S-1 battery, also tracking the decoys, opened fire with its 30mm guns, filling the sky with tracers. It emptied its magazines in seconds, creating a 30-second reload window. With the ground defenses silenced, only the escorting fighters remained. But Ukraine's solution was already descending from the stratosphere. Launched from near Kharkiv at 12:25 a.m., a Ukrainian short-range ballistic missile reached its coordinates at precisely 12:28 a.m. Instead of brute force, it detonated at 17,000 feet above the lead IL-78, unleashing a 2-part warhead. 200 tungsten fragments shredded the air, creating a radar clutter cloud. Then came the real weapon, a localized electromagnetic pulse. For the Russian fighter pilots, everything went white. Their advanced AESA radars overloaded, their screens filling with static. They were blind for exactly 12 seconds. That was all Ukraine needed. Flying only 150 feet above the forest floor, 4 real Bayraktar TB2S began their ascent. What followed was a synchronized 4-part execution. TB201 struck first from the north. Its laser painted a pinpoint on engine number 2 of the lead IL-78. After 9.2 seconds, its MML missile hit, tearing through the nacelle, destroying the fan blades and crippling the tanker. The massive aircraft lurched violently and began losing altitude. From the northeast, TB202 delivered the most precise blow. Its laser marked the reinforced steel coupling where a Tu-22's probe was docking with the tanker's hose. Its missile sliced through the connection, causing jet fuel to pour out at 180 gallons per minute, instantly creating a huge vapor cloud around the wounded tanker. TB203, approaching from the south, provided the ignition. Its MAM-L missile struck the auxiliary fuel tank, detonating on impact. The vapor cloud ignited in a 420-degree fireball, but Ukraine planned for total annihilation. TB204 from the west targeted the second tanker's right-wing auxiliary tank, firing an insurance shot. The first 3 missiles struck almost simultaneously at 12 hours, 28 minutes and 30 seconds AM. Exactly 0.8 seconds after the Tu-22's probe had locked into place, physics took over. The thermobaric conditions ignited the fuel-air mixture. This wasn't a normal explosion. The air itself became the bomb. 238,000 pounds of jet fuel erupted in a massive fireball. The IL-78 spine suffered a catastrophic mid-fuselage break, tearing the aircraft in half. One of the Tu-22 M3S, tethered during refueling, was dragged down with it. There was no escape for the second tanker. The shockwave from the first explosion, a wall of fire, washed over it as TB204's missile punctured its wing tank. At 12 hours, 28 minutes and 42 seconds AM, the second blast lit the landscape white, briefly illuminating the surrounding area. As Russian fighters regained their radar vision, all they saw was an inferno where their tankers had been. Chaos followed. A MiG-31 fired an R-37M at 12 hours, 28 minutes and 48 seconds AM. But with no lock, it missed by 18 miles. A Su-35 launched a 9M96E2. It hit falling debris instead of a drone. Only Su-35 number 07 stayed calm. Using thermal imaging, he found TB204 diving toward the forest canopy. Closing to 800 meters, he opened fire with his GHH-31 cannon. The 30mm rounds shredded TB204, destroying the drone. 3 of the 4 Ukrainian drones vanished back into the forest. 1 was lost, a small cost for what came next. The strategic shockwave was immediate. 2 IL-78 M90 A tankers were destroyed. 2 Tu-22 M3 bombers were dragged down with them. $560 million of Russian aviation hardware was erased, but the real consequence was strategic paralysis. Russia now had fewer than 8 operational IL-78S left across its global inventory. Its long-range aviation fleet had effectively lost the ability to strike more than 400 miles into Ukraine. This was not temporary. Analysts estimated a minimum 6-month operational degradation. Russia panicked. The remaining tankers were evacuated deep into Siberia, but the night was far from over. Operation Hose Sniper was only the opening act. Across Russia, coordinated strikes unfolded. 40 long-range drones hit the Ryazan oil refinery, turning its distillation tower into a pillar of flame visible 50 miles away. Near Voronezh, another swarm bypassed air defenses to strike the Electron plant, crippling avionics production for Jaran series drones. In Bryansk, a single drone struck the traction substation powering the main military rail line. It didn't damage the rails, it simply cut power, halting transport for days. This was not random chaos, it was a multi-front attack on the nervous system of Russia's war machine. Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson called for permanent long-term isolation of Russia, military, economic, and political, urging a total cutoff of Russian gas and a new era of European defense spending. That stance set the tone for Europe as the month unfolded. The political aftershocks came just as fast. At 4:11 a.m. on November 3rd, a furious President Lukashenko called Putin, "You told me my airspace was safe." Ukraine's allies reacted with equal intensity. The United States and Poland announced a new $5 billion aid package, fast-tracking ATACMS missiles and 300 Switchblade 600 drones. The numbers told the story clearly. Russia inflicted $1.8 billion in damage. Ukraine spent $8.5 million to inflict $560 million in direct losses, a 65-to-1 return on investment. A clear lesson of modern warfare emerged. Victory belongs not to the side with the most expensive jets, but to the side that can turn a single 0.8-second vulnerability into 6 months of strategic paralysis. And the geopolitical fallout deepened. Days later, Russia announced acceptance of a volunteer contingent from North Korea, 10,000 infantry and 5,000 engineers. It was an open admission of catastrophic manpower losses. The move triggered new alerts in South Korea and Japan. The lines for a generational confrontation were being drawn. This left a final strategic question. With Ukraine receiving long-range ATACMS and hundreds of precision drones, commanders now had a choice. Use ATACMS to launch more deep strikes like Jose Sniper, or deploy Switchblades to halt Russia's grinding advances near Pokrovsk. What should take priority? Let me know your strategic choice and your reasoning below.